hopefully we'll gain the proper understanding of what tawakkul is all about today, inshallah. We actually spoke about this before when we were studying the text of Ibn Ashir al-Murshid Mu'in. He spoke about وَيَتَحَلَّى بِمَقَامَةِ الْيَقِينِ, and one is to adorn oneself with the stations of certitude. And amongst the maqamat, or the different stations of certitude, was mentioned the station of tawakkul. Tawakkul was one of those. Tawakkul is defined by some as إلقاء النفس في العبودية وإخراجها عن صفة الربوبية, which translates to mean, it means to cast oneself into complete servitude and remove oneself from the characteristic of lordship. So you cast yourself into the state of servitude and bring yourself out of the station or the state of lordship. Now what that means is this: as believers and people of faith, that though we understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us certain capacities, He given us certain type of abilities and strengths as well, but those capacities are not absolute, and those capacities are dependent upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala determining that those capacities will actually work when we move to utilize them. One thing we talked about last week was the very idea of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being the creator of human actions, and that the human being acquires our actions. We make choices and we acquire reward or punishment, or the entitlement to reward or the entitlement to punishment on the basis of the choices that we make, not because of the actions that we do. At least this is Orthodox, this mainstream Sunni belief. And this doesn't mean that when our actions do actually come into fruition, they come into being, and when they're materialized, that we just say, oh, well, it doesn't really mean anything. No, rather, of course, the fact that the action exists, we can then scrutinize both the action and the state of mind and the intentions in people's hearts after that. And this is why in any criminal proceeding that attorneys often are trying to establish criminal intent on the part of the individual. So when a person commits a crime, let's say if you commit murder, they want to be able to classify the particular crime in the right category. If it's voluntary or involuntary manslaughter, for instance, they may look at, for instance, the weapon that was utilized. They can think of the circumstances. They try to establish a motive, for the murder, and if they can establish those type of things, then we'll charge them with first-degree murder or second-degree or third-degree murder. So this is normal that this would occur, and so as a believer, we acknowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the source of all strength. He is the source of all capacities, and this is why we say وَلَا حَوْلَ وَلَا قُوَّةَ إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ, that there's neither might nor strength except by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's no might against the commission of sin, nor any strength to fulfill the obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala except by God. Right? So tawakkul is, as stated in this definition, إلقاء النفس في العبودية. It is casting myself into a state of servitude. That is by acknowledging who the source of all power is, and acknowledging that you yourself ultimately have no true power and no true strength. It is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَإِخْرَاجُهَا عَنْ صِفَةِ الرُّبُوبِيَّةِ, and expelling oneself or removing oneself from the attribute of lordship. Right? Because if I say I have power, I have strength, that in itself fundamentally is taking on a particular characteristic of God, in that sense. And again, it's not to say that we don't acknowledge that human beings have capacities that Allah has given us, but the subtle difference is just that we believe that those capacities and the implementation or the utilization of those capacities, they ultimately originate with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is Allah who brings things out of the sphere of non-existence into the sphere of existence. In one example of this, you see, like for instance, when, as the story goes, when Ibrahim alayhi salam, he was about to be cast into the fire by his people. It is said that, that the angel came to him and asked him, is there anything that you had, any need? هل لك من حاجة? Do you have a need? And so he responds, from you, no. I don't have any need from you, not from the angel. But in one narration it says that he said that hasbi min su'ali ilmuhu bihali, that his knowledge of my state is sufficient. His knowledge of my state suffices me from having to ask. That is to say that I don't have to ask Allah for anything because He already knows what I want and what I need, right? So that's the nature of the true spirit of tawakkul, of reliance, complete reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there are different levels to tawakkul. That on one level of reliance on God is the level of when an individual takes God, someone as like an advocate for oneself. Like for instance, you're being accused of a crime. You get an attorney, you have a defense lawyer, and you put your trust in their expertise and their knowledge of the law, and their trust that they really going to do their best to make sure that you don't go to prison or whatever it may be, right? So that's a certain type of tawakkul, but it's not the best type, But we do defer to people's expertise. That is a certain form of tawakkul. And I guess in some ways, many of us really struggle with this because we live in a world, this capitalist world especially, where we all have salaries, right? And we get paid our checks, and so in one sense, we really don't have true tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rather, our tawakkul is on our employers. We put our trust that our employers will, deem it necessary to actually pay our salaries or pay, our monthly or weekly, biweekly salaries, and when it's time to do so, as they've been promised. So in one sense, we're putting our trust in them. That is a certain type of tawakkul. But their tawakkul is different. The employer's tawakkul is even higher, because the employer is the individual who actually has to go out and do things to try to bring in wealth on a regular basis and doesn't really know how much profit he or she will make this month or this year, right? Will we be able to pay all of our employers this particular month? Their tawakkul is different because they can't really foresee if there's going to be a profit, right? So, but us, we put our trust in, of course, yeah. It's been happening for this long. There's no reason to think that it won't come again next week, right? So there are different levels of it. So in one sense, it's like sort of placing the person as an advocate. For us, it's like our employer is like our advocate. We put our trust in their track record or in their belief that the employee is completely necessary for the success of our business and our enterprise. But then another level of tawakkul is the level of like an infant being like a baby, a newborn baby, and that child comes into this world and screams and cries, and anytime it needs something, when it's hungry, it cries. When it needs to have its diaper changed, it cries. And the mother or the parents, they respond to those needs. And so the child places a certain amount of trust in knowing that when I scream, that my needs are going to be met. Right? So that is a higher level than the first, right? But still not complete. It is still not complete. And then the third level would be the level of like being a dead corpse. Whereas a dead corpse can't scream. A dead corpse can't move. Rather, when it's time to be washed and prepared for burial, the corpse is just at the whim and will of the washer, right? And that's the highest level. And this is, of course, very difficult for anyone to really to reach. And so the author, we come back to the poem where we stopped. We talked about وَخَيْرُ وَشَرُّ مَعًا تَجْدِيدُهُ بِقَدْرِ اللَّهِ كَمَا يُرِيدُهُ. Evil and good, both when renewed, happen by God's decree, just as He wills it. God is creator of His servant's action via a capacity He furnished from Himself. وَاللَّهُ خَالِقٌ لِفِعْلِ عَبْدِهِ بِقُدْرَةٍ قَدَّرَهَا مِنْ عِنْدِهِ وهو الذي أبدع فعل مكتسب والكسب للعبد مختارا ينتسب. So it is He who initiates the act of the acquirer, while the acquisition to the servant is figuratively ascribed. And then now we move into, in the poem, discussion of tawakkul, which is almost extremely difficult. It's somewhat easy, but at the same time difficult to translate or find an exact synonym for it in Arabic. But tawakkul, we often call it reliance on God, trusting God. And so he goes on and says, وَاخْتَلَفُوا فَرُجِّحَ التَّوَكُّلُ وَآخَرُونَ اكْتِسَابُ أَفْضَلُ. They differed, meaning the scholars, they differed, but reliance is favored, while others say that employment is superior. So basically what the author of the poem is doing is placing tawakkul at one extreme, or juxtaposing tawakkul with what is called iktisab. So either you are a person who goes out and seeks your provision, right, in this world, you seek employment, right, self-employment or employment along with others, or you're in a state of tawakkul. You're in a state of reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where you don't go out and seek the material means in order to bring in your sustenance. Now, a number of scholars have criticized the author for this sort of juxtaposition, because they're not mutually exclusive. They're not they're not really opposites. This idea that either I'm not working or I am working, right? That's not necessarily the state. Rather, the Prophet ﷺ did both. The Prophet ﷺ, it is said his hal, his state, was a state of tawakkul, of complete reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but his sunnah was iktisab, was actually go out and to work for his provision, right? To seek his provision. So the Prophet had both, so to make it seem as if that these are opposites, in itself is an overstatement. And as a matter of fact, there's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ where he talks about the Prophet Dawood ﷺ, where he says, "Ma akala ahadun ta'aman khayran mimma من أكل ما أكل أحد طعاما خيرا مما كسب بيده." أو كما قال, that a person does not eat any food better than what they themselves have taken or earned with one's own hand. وَإِنَّ نَبِيَّ اللَّهِ دَاوُودَ كَانَ يَأْكُلُ بِعَمَلِ يَدِهِ. And the Prophet David ﷺ used to eat through the work that he did with his own hand. So the Prophet is encouraging people to go out and work. That's one thing he encourages them to do. You find this throughout, the seerah. You find this in the hadith literature. You find it in other traditions as well. Conversations about these type of things. And then in one hadith, he talks about لو توكلتم على الله حق توكله لرزقكم كما يرزق الطير. That if you truly relied on Allah in the way that He deserved to be relied upon, then he will provide for you in the same way that he provides for the birds. تَغْدُو خِمَاسًا وَتَرُوحُ بِطَانًا. That the birds, they go out empty, with their bellies empty in the morning, and they return at night full. Right? So if you truly relied upon Allah in the way that he should be relied upon, then he will provide for you in the same way that he provides for birds. Right? So you notice here he's talking about go out and work. The birds, they don't just sit around and say, hey man, I wish like a piece of bread drops on my head. No, they get out and they just they fly around. You see them. They're constantly looking and search. But they start off in the morning, nothing. Fly to the beach and there are people there throwing bread, whatever. They find their sustenance. They find or they, dig into the ground, find a worm, whatever it may be. That's what they do. So if we truly had the right understanding of tawakkul, or we truly did rely upon Allah, then that will be our state. But it is a state that we hope to grow into if we are not there already. Right, so he says, so there's a khilaf, there's a disagreement between the scholars about if it is better to go out and seek one's provision, or for one to just simply lay idle and just await for the provision to come in, or to to rely upon others to bring one's sustenance. And this is that classical distinction that's made between the worshiper, devout worshiper who stays in the mosque praying and fasting and things like that, and then the one who actually goes out seeking their provision. And the Prophet made it clear that that for those who are bringing provision for the one in the masjid, that they are better than those who are worshiping. And he says in one famous hadith, "Al-yadu al-ulya khayra min al-yad as-sufla," that the higher hand is better than the lower hand. Right, but this is not to say that simply because the person who is bringing provision for the worshiper, that we should belittle worship. That is not the aim, the intent. Worship is what this whole deen, this religion is all about, right? It's just that we understand that service and worship has a very broad and very pliant and flexible definition. That is not just simply that you're either doing it this way or you're doing that. So, and it's like one story similar to this is Umar ibn Khattab, he passed by a group of men who were worshiping in the masjid, and he asked them, he said, well, who are you, or what are you doing? And so they responded to him, نحن المتوكلون. We are those who rely upon Allah. We are those who are dependent and reliant upon Allah. And so Umar responded to them, he said, Bal antum muttakilun. No, you are those who are reliant on people. Right? Meaning that, you're somewhat almost like a beggar in the sense that because had it not been for the fact that there's some people going out seeking their dunya, then you would not be able to eat. You would not be able to find clothing, whatever it may be. So the people of the asbab and the people of tajreed, what we're going to talk about later, both are important types of people. So it's a وَاخْتَلَفُوا فَرُجِحَ التَّوَكُّلُ. Right, so they differed in reliance, but reliance was favored. وَآخَرُونَ اِكْتِسَابُ أَفْضَلُ. While others say that employment is superior. So it's khilaf, a disagreement between scholars. وَالثَّالِثُ الْمُخْتَارُ أَنْ يُفَصَّلَ وَبِاخْتِلَافِ النَّاسِ أَنْ يُنَزَّلَ. The third preferred view is one of nuance, and that according to the dissimilarity among people are they to be ranked. Right, so there are three different views. One view that it's better to just devote yourself to worship. Another view that you should actually go out, and if you require material means, that you should go out and do that, in order to provide for your needs. And then a third view is that rather we look at the state of the individual. It depends on the individual and that individual state. So he goes on and says, to give an example about this distinction, مَنْ طَاعَةَ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى آثَارًا لَا سَخِطًا إِنْ رِزْقُهُ تَعَصَارًا. The one devotion to God without the one devotion to God he prefers without dissatisfaction if his sustenance is constrained. وَلَمْ يَكُنْ مُسْتَشْرِفًا لِلرِّزْقِ مِنْ أَحَدٍ بَلْ مِنْ إِلَهِ الْخَلْقِ فَإِنَّ ذَا فِي حَقِّهِ التَّوَكُّلُ أَوْلَى وَإِلَى الْاكْتِسَابُ أَفْضَلُ. And so the one who prefers without dissatisfaction, if it happens that his sustenance is restrained, the one who prefers devotion to God without feeling dissatisfied, if his sustenance is constrained and is not concerned for sustenance from anyone, but only from the God of creation, then with respect to such a person, reliance is more suitable. Otherwise, employment is superior. So what this means is that if a person has all of his or her needs taken care of, food, clothing, shelter, right? And your time has been freed up to avoid the distractions of the dunya, and you can devote yourself to worship. And while in that state, you find yourself constrained that yes, you get your provision, but it's not a lot, right? But it's enough. And while it being enough, you don't feel bothered by that. If it doesn't bother you that you have a very small amount of provision, they say that's with regard to this person, then tawakkul is better for that person. It is better for that person, right? Why? Because as long as your state is a state of contentment with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right, with what He gives you, then, hey, remain there. Be where you are, right? Remain in that state, and don't try to transition into a different state. وَطَالِبُ التَّجْرِيدِ وَهْوَ فِي السَّبَبِ خَفِيُّ شَهْوَةٍ دَعَتْ فَلْيُجْتَنَبْ. And the seeker of spiritual divestiture, I know this word, I can say it, divestiture. Right, let's try it, divestiture. I don't know, so sometimes my tongue just gets tied up. The seeker of spiritual divestiture, when he is of material means, is being invited by a muted passion, so let it be abjured. So basically what it means is that, okay, on one hand, you have a person who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given the world, giving you the material means to take care of your needs and more. So not just only what you need, but more than that as well. And giving you a certain amount of worldly success to the point that you actually don't even have to really work for it anymore. I mean, think about this. Think like this about, let's say, you inherited massive amounts of wealth, from your parents, or let's say that you did a good job in getting started early, and then investing in the stock market, stocks and things like that. And alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you to the point that you don't even have to work. All your needs are taken care of. That it may be that either your nafs says to you, you know what, I probably can do more than this and get more than what I have, right? That's one thing. That's one idea, is to figure out other ways to make more income, as so many of the people at the top do on a regular basis, right? As you know, at this big income gap, disparity between those at the top and the rest of us, it's like, because that's just the human nature, that, the Prophet said it, if son of Adam had 2 valleys of wealth and he would want a third, right? That's just the way it goes. It's just never enough. You have one thing and then you get tired of it. It's like, well, I want something new now. If I'm always eating vanilla ice cream, after a while, I get tired. Well, maybe we'll try some strawberry. That's just our nature. So this individual, that is one option. So, let's see if I can get more. The other thought could be, well, since Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has actually freed up my time, and I don't need to be concerned about bringing extra wealth in, I should devote myself to worship. I should devote myself to worship because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has removed from me the concern with with my everyday needs, my daily needs. So basically, if a person in that state, who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has granted them a certain type of success, material success, and the response is to then devote oneself to one's worship, then alhamdulillah, that person is in a state of tajdeed. But if you're talking about another type of person who, let's say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you certain obligations, like familiar obligations, that you're a married person, you have children, and alhamdulillah, Allah also has blessed you to fulfill their needs. But sometimes you struggle and you go out and you need to seek to gain additional wealth in order to do that. Then basically, if that person in that state who has these obligations, especially towards other people, wants to divest himself or herself from those particular obligations so that he or she can focus on spiritual concerns only, then this itself he calls shahwa khafiyya. It is a muted passion, or that is to say that one is expected to reside where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us residence. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made us people who don't need to be concerned about our needs, and we are taking advantage of our time, during those particular circumstances, then I should not want to become a person who seeks out my provision. And if I'm one that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not allowed for me or given me the opportunity to free up my time to focus on exclusively spiritual matters, then I should not, but He grants me a certain amount of success in maintaining my relationships and my responsibilities, then I should not necessarily want to transition from that state to the state where the other person is in, the devout worshiper. Why? Because both of them are good states. The ibadah is more than just simply worshiping in the masjid. It's more than just fasting. It's more than just praying at night. That work itself is a form of ibadah. It's if the intention is correct. That if my intention for working is to provide for my family, if the time that I take out to spend with my children and my spouse is useful and fruitful, then that in itself is a type of worship that I'm involved in. You see, so basically, this is where this is going. So if you have been placed in a state where you don't have the time to devote exclusively to worship because of these responsibilities, then you don't seek out or wish to be divested. Don't seek divestiture. Don't seek that because in itself is a certain type. It's a mute passion in the sense that it is a sign of one's discontent with the state that Allah has put us in. It's a certain type of discontent. And we don't want to express any displeasure with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has done for us and the states that He's put us in. And in this regard, we have stories from the history, the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, along these lines. Like, for instance, one thing that the Prophet ﷺ did with the Sahaba when the Muhajirin came to Medina is that he did what's called a ta'akhi. That he made them form like a sort of a fellowship, or sort of he paired them up into brothers. That each of them were responsible for caring for the needs of the other. Right, because the Muhajirin, all their wealth was left in Mecca, and they came to Medina. Sometimes he paired Muhajiri with the Ansari, sometimes Muhajirin with the Muhajiri. And so two Sahaba, Salman al-Farisi was made the akhi of the brother of Abu Darda. So each day they would go and look out and look for one another in order to ensure their needs are taken care of. So one day Salman Farisi, he comes to the home of Abu Darda, and he sees his wife Darda. She's there, and as a hadith describes her, she's mutabaddila. She's in a disheveled state, or I guess you would say it probably would be it wouldn't be a stretch to characterize her state as the state of one who looks like they were depressed, right? She was not. She did not look like a woman who was concerned with how men saw her, right? Especially even her husband, And that is one of the things that when you're married, that you try to do things to make sure that you do things to, you look good for one another. You do things, you tazayyun, that you embellish yourselves for one another. And so, so Salman, he noticed this, and so he asked her. He said, "Well, what's wrong? Ma sha'nuk? Ma sha'nuki? What's wrong? What's wrong?" Darda. And so she said to him, "Abu Darda has no need for anything in this world. So he fasts every day. He prays all night. He doesn't spend any time with me." And so Salman comes over one day with some food, and he comes over and he offers food by Abu Darda. And Salman says to Abu Darda, "Go ahead, eat. You eat." And he said, "Oh, no, I'm fasting." So he said to him, "Well, I won't eat until you eat. You break your fast, eat. I won't eat until you eat." So eventually he pressed them, and apparently Abu Darda, he gives in, he breaks his fast. Then Salman spends a night at the home with Abu Darda. At one point in the night, Abu Darda stands up and he wants to pray tahajjud. Salman looks at him. He says, "No, go to sleep. Sleep now. Not yet." And then in the morning comes, and so he says to Abu Darda, "Now, get up. Let's pray." After this, he says to Abu Darda, "Inna li jasadika alayka haqqan," that verily your body has a right over you. "Wa inna li rabbika alayka haqqan," your Lord has a right over you. "Wa inna li ahlika alayka haqqan," and your family, meaning your wife, has a right over you. He says to him, "Sum wa aftir," fast sometimes, other times don't fast. Right? Don't fast every day, just fast. Sometimes don't, other times don't fast. "Wa salli wa ati ahlak," said, pray, perform your salat, and sometimes spend time with your family. Sometimes spend time behind. And give every person who has a right his right. Right. So here's a situation where Abu Darda is in a state of the asbab. He has material concerns. He has worldly concerns. Right. He has worldly responsibilities. Right. His responsibility to his wife. Right. In particular, right? And he's not giving her rights. But what he wants is tajreed. He wants to be in a state of tajreed, a state where he's divested of all these distractions, worldly distractions. So what does he do? "I'm going to fast, I'm going to pray, to the extent that I neglect those responsibilities, right?" So that in itself is problematic, deemed to be problematic. And so this is why Salman comes to him. And then in the morning they go to the Prophet and they tell him what occurs. And the Prophet, he affirms that Salman was correct. This is, you do as Salman told you to do. A similar story is the story when there were these three men who, Sahaba, they came to the Prophet's wives and they were asking him, asking them about the Prophet's worship at home, because they found out that Allah forgave or the Prophet for anything he might do in the future, right? Anything he might have done in the past or might do in the future. So they said, well, if that's the case, then, we want to know what he's doing, So maybe what he's doing is what led to that. So they go and ask him, they say, what? That's all he's doing? He's doing that? He prays a little bit. Sometimes he sleeps, he fasts sometimes, and sometimes he doesn't fast. He enjoys his wives. He has, things like that. So it's, so one of them says, well, you know what? I'm going to fast all the time. Another one, he says, you know what? And I'm going to spend every single night in prayer, no sleep. And the other one said, and I'm never going to get married. So this reached the Prophet ﷺ, and he said to them that inni akhshakum wa atqakum lillah, says I'm the most fearful and the most God conscious of all people. Right. Yeah, he said, and I fast, and sometimes I break my fast. I pray, sometimes I sleep. Usalli wa arqut wa atazawwaju nisa, and I marry women. Right. فَمَنْ رَغِبَ عَنْ سُنَّتِي فَلَيْسَ مِنِّي, and whoever despises my sunnah is not part of me. So this is, again, an example of those type of things of like, well, you're given, it all depends on the person's situation. So some people, they have these material responsibilities, and you can either look at them as distractions, or you can look at them as things that bring you closer to Allah and you get reward for doing. That as also those things are ibadah, but if you see them as distractions, then you may be led to this search or this attempt to escape those responsibilities, and in making that decision, you are expressing implicitly a displeasure with the situation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put you in. So this is what he's talking about. من طاعة الله تعالى آثر على ساخط رزقه تعصر. And so وطالب التجريد وهو في السبب خفي شهوة دعت فليجتنب. And the seeker of spiritual divestiture, when he is of material means, is being invited by a muted passion, so let it be abjured. وذو تجرد لأسباب سأل فهو الذي عن ذروة العز نزل. And the one possessing spiritual divestiture who asks for material means is one who has fallen from the peak of honor. Right? So you have fallen from the peak of honor if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put you in a situation where all of your needs are taken care of and you don't have these distractions. Right? You may not have a family, you may not have children, right? But all your needs are taken care of, and you actually are given opportunity, and you take advantage of that opportunity by praying extra and fasting more and spending your time in spiritual pursuits, that such a person should not desire to leave that state, right? Because again, what we talked about before, what is called himma aliyah. There's a lofty zeal or aspiration, right, that one has, or a himma daniyah, or lowly aspiration. You're a person of higher aspiration, of lowly aspiration, right? And so the higher aspiration, or the person of high aspiration, connects his or her concerns with lofty things. And in our religion, that the loftier things are the matters of the spirit, refining the spirit, increasing our knowledge of Islam, praying more, fasting more, giving charity, those type of things. That's the state. That's ultimately what we've been created for, is the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so the dunya is just simply a necessary part of that. And in spite of it being a necessary part, we still reward it when we do it with the right type of mentality, type of understanding, right? So if a person desires to depart from that state where all of your needs are taken care of and your distractions are removed and you are taking advantage of your free time, then that in itself, inhitat an himmatil aliyah, as Ibn Ata'illah says, it is a debasement of falling down from the loftier aspiration. And so basically the author of this poem is really making a reference to a verse that actually more than one verse, but one in particular is the main verse that he's referring to from the hikam of the aphorisms of Ibn Ata'illah Iskandari, wherein he says, إرادتك التجريد مع إقامة الله إياك من الشهوة الخفية مع إقامة الله إياك في الأسباب من الشهوة الخفية, that your desire for divestiture, while in spite of the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has established you upon material means, right, that in itself is a mute passion. That's from a mute passion that you have. وإرادتك الأسباب مع إقامة الله إياك في التجريد انحطاط عن الهمة العالية. And your desire for the material means, while Allah Himself has placed you in a state of divestiture, that in itself is falling below the higher aspiration, falling below the higher aspiration. And so, in another verse in the Hikam actually sort of summarizes what it really is all about, is where he also says, "Arih nafsaka an at-tadbiri," right? Relieve yourself of planning. Relieve yourself of planning. فما قام به غيرك عنك فلا تقم به لنفسك. So because whatever another person performs for you, don't perform it for yourself, Right? Now, it doesn't mean that you don't plan, literally don't plan things, but it means is that once you've done everything which is necessary for success, and there's nothing else for you materially to do, then you just leave it in Allah's hands, right? But also it means that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is placing you in a certain state, then don't desire to transition from that state to another. وذو تجرج لأسباب سائل فهو الذي عن ذروة العز نزل والحق أن تمكث حيث أنزلك حتى يكون الله عنه نكلك. What is right is that you reside wherever He has given you residence until it is God who transfers you beyond it. Right? So it is right for you to reside where Allah has given you residence. He made you amongst the people of material means or the people of divestiture. Where you don't need to pursue them, right? Then be where Allah put you. قم أقم حيث أقامك الله. قصد العدو ترك جانب الله في صورة الأسباب منك أبدا. And the reason why, because it said the goal of the enemy, means shaitan, the goal of the enemy is to forsake regard for God through the material means he manifested from you. Right, so shaitan's major purpose is to do things to make you displeased with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? So if you're displeased with your situation, that implies you're displeased with Allah, because Allah is the ultimate author of your situation. Right? Of course, it's not to say that certain things you do, like you commit a crime, you go to jail. That's not, that's you. But when we're talking about these type of issues, the matters of rizq, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is وَمَا مِن دَابَةٍ فِي الْأَرْضِ إِلَّا عَلَى اللَّهِ رِزْقُهَا, that there's not a single creature in the earth except that Allah has undertaken the responsibility of their sustenance. Right? So if that is the case, then reside where Allah has given you residence. أَوْلِي تَمَاهُنٍ مَعَ التَّكَاسُلِ أَظْهَرَهُ فِي سُورَةِ التَّوَكُّلِ. Right, so the goal of the enemy is to forsake regard for God through the material means he manifested from you, or through menial service along with indolence which he manifested in the form of reliance. Or that is to say, sometimes a person, you remember that example I talked about, like say for instance, Allah has given you these material means and given you this free time. And one particular direction you can go in would be the direction of, why don't I just go and get more? Allah has opened things up for me, so I might as well just max it out. Take it to its extreme, because inshallah it can help the Muslims. Right? You sell yourself that, even if you never really come back to help the Muslims, or it's almost never, I'm not ready yet, I haven't done it. Once I'm really, really ready, then I'll help the Muslims, Then you get 2 million, then it's like, once I get 10 million, then I'll probably be ready I can really have an impact on the Muslims, right? And so what you do, you abandon your spiritual concerns, your spiritual needs, and that in itself is a type of indolence or laziness, right? Out of this, you convince yourself that, work is ibadah too, right? We said that before, it is. But when it goes to an extreme like this, it's no longer ibadah, right? When I'm just doing it and pursuing more, and I'm abandoning my obligations. And which really brings to mind another verse from the Hikam where he says, اجتهادك فيما ضمن لك وتقصيرك فيما طلب منك دليل على انطماس البصيرة منك. He said that your striving for what has already been guaranteed for you and your falling short of what has been demanded of you is a sign that your heart's eye has been extinguished. It's a sign that your heart's eye has been distinguished. Right? So what is guaranteed for us? Our provision. You're going to get only what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He has written for you. Right? But what He has demanded of you is for you to worship Him, to take time, your 5 prayers, your Ramadan, and then beyond that, as well, if you truly want closer to Allah, then you add to your obligations. Right, so this is one of those things. And then he says, "Man waffaqa Allah ta'ala yulhamu al-bahthu an hadaini thumma ya'lamu." Whoever God the Sublime graces will be inspired to search for these two, and then will know. All right. And then said, and then he will know. It's actually not complete. The thought is not complete. من وفق الله تعالى يلهم البحث عن هذين ثم يعلم ألا يكون غير ما يشاء فعلمنا إن لم يزد هباء. Said, whoever God graces will be inspired to search for these two, and then will know that naught happens save what He wills. So what we know, if He wills not, is worthless. So what we know, if He wills not, is worthless. Right. And that's where he concludes the major topics of discussions, but then he concludes with a few different verses. Walhamdulillahi ala kamari sa'ila tawfiqin li husni hari thumma salatu wa salamu abada ala nabiyyi hashimiyyi ahmada wa ali wa sahbi wa man lahum qafa wa hasbunallahu ta'ala wa kafa. And praise be to God upon perfection, asking for divine success for a good state. Then blessing and peace eternally upon the Hashemite Prophet Ahmad, also the family, companions, and those who follow them. And God the Sublime is our sufficiency, and that's enough. So with that, we've concluded the study of both Murshid Ma'in, the section related to the principles of Tasawwuf, and the Khatima of the Zubat text regarding the quintessentials of Islam. So this doesn't mean that we are finished for the semester. We actually are scheduled to continue until May the 7th, and that will be the final lesson for this semester. Next week is still not clear. I won't be here, but I'm trying to see if we can find a substitute for next week. And so just look out for the announcements on that. Sheikh Faraz, he still will have his normal session next week, but next week I definitely won't be here, so hopefully we'll be able to find a nice substitute for that, and we'll continue with some reflections on spirituality, and then the following week I'll be back, and then the week after that the concluding session will be led by Imam Zaid, inshallah. So, wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. So, if there are any questions, then the floor is open now. Now, tafadhal. Person has tawakkul on something besides Allah. Is it a sign? Is it a sin, or is it a form of a weak iman? I mean, according to these teachings, the teachings of our suluk, it would be a sign of deficient faith. It's not complete tawheed, and our lives are about trying to realize tawheed, right? It's not necessarily a sign of that is a sin, but as the saying goes, "Hasanatul abrar, sayyi'atul muqarrabin," that the good deeds of the righteous are the bad deeds of those who are drawn near to God. So it's just a matter of perspective, So depending on your maqam, your station, your spiritual station, certain things are expected from you, right? Which are not acceptable from you, but may be acceptable from someone on a lower station. Like, for instance, Ibrahim alayhi salam, he's talked on Yom Qiyamah when it comes to the matter of intercession, that it is said in the famous hadith that he will remember the lies that he told, right? And for that reason, he will feel unfit to go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to ask for intercession. They weren't lies, in the sense that we understand them today. Rather, he did things or said things at different moments in order to, as a form of protection, or as a way to manifest the truth. Like, for instance, when the people, after he smashed the idols, and the people came back and they said, "Well, who did this?" He just said, "Well, the big one did it." Right? No, he knew that they knew, right, that if he said that it was a very ridiculous notion, because they knew that the idols couldn't move, they couldn't do anything, right? And so that's why they say, well, they can't move, they can't do this. He said, well, why do you worship them then? Right. So that's an example of one of those things, So but still, or the example when he goes into the town and the king wants to take his wife, right? Because he was there was this custom of taking the wives of men and raping them, and so he said, no, but this is my sister, right? And he was telling the truth and said, yes, he's my sister in faith as well, but it was a type of ruse, intended to ward off the harm that might come by saying that, by telling the total truth, the full truth, that this was in fact his wife. So he felt that his maqam was such that he should not have had to say even that, and relied on his faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah was going to bring a good outcome from the situation, right? So you understand? So it just depends on what your spiritual station is, So if your reliance or your tawakkul on the person, or your ittikal, or some would say, a level of reliance on the person is such that you put complete and total faith in them, such that you believe that they themselves inherently have the power to benefit or harm you, then that would be a sin, right? All right. Got it? Anyone else? No. Yes. Mm-hmm. It's kind of difficult when you have so many ayats in your head, but yeah, sometimes I would know the surah, but there are surahs that I know, and sometimes I recite verses from them, and I can't remember what surah it is until I actually go and open up the mushaf, so it's just one of those things, and I'm not as good at that as some other people are, so it's just, when it comes to mind, I say it, and then if you ask me the surah, sometimes I can tell you, yes, it's from this surah, and other times it's like, well, I think it's this surah or it's that one, so. Yeah, okay. Yes, sir. Yes, go ahead. Self-accusation. Right. 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 Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. Right. Right. No, I think Maslow is focused on what actually his theory was referred to as a sort of his hierarchy of needs. The human needs, universal sort of needs, it's psychological needs more than anything. Well, sometimes the physical and psychological, but that in itself is different from when I talk about spiritual station. It's not the same, So I'm talking about a certain type of spiritual awareness that comes about through experience, practice, and like for instance, in some sense you can look at the Islamic spirituality as a higher form of theology, or we can call it an imminent theology as opposed to a transcendent theology. So whereas our aqidah, our creed that we learn as Muslims is a transcendent theology. That say we learn what God is, what God is not, right? You learn the attributes of God. So it becomes an exponential study of God. Whereas our mysticism, our spirituality is an experiential study of the Creator. So think about it like this. I just met you today, right? Okay, I learned your name, right? I learned where you're from, right? I learned why you're here, but I still can't say I really know you, right? And throughout our lives, we are confronted by a lot of phenomena, a lot of encounters, sometimes with people, the creation, and if you see your encounter with the creation as an encounter with the Creator at the same time. Not to say that, of course, that you're Allah in that sense, but that everything is a sign, and everything is a sign of the Creator, right? And so my experiences, my joy, my pain, all those different things, they teach me certain things, right? About the character, the personality of my Creator. You follow me? So that's different than, okay, well, I want to feel actualized, right? I want to feel like that I have a purpose in life, right? You understand? That's two different things. And so, yes, as believers, our purpose is, we already know we have a purpose in life, but the purpose, he's talking about more of a secular type of purpose, in the sense that something, I have a role to play in society, right? And that in itself has an impact on my psychological state. It does. But this other thing also has an impact on my psychological state. But it's about prioritizing and understanding which of those things are more important, you see. You get it? Okay. Anything else? If that's all, then alhamdulillah. Appreciate everyone coming out. And as mentioned before, just look out for announcements for next week with regard to whether or not there'll be a class for this the morning. If not, then the hope is that they'll be able to announce that before you drive out here and find yourself in an empty, cold room. Inshallah. But the week after, definitely, and the final class will be May 7th, inshallah, with Imam Zayd Shakir. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر وسبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. آمين. السلام عليكم.